All right.
Is this everybody here?
These are important ones.
Yeah. Well, come on and gather around. This is our rainfall simulator. My name's Clay Pope. I work with Ed here at Redlands Community College. I work in an agreement with the Agricultural Research Service and the Natural Resources Conservation Service to help run the Southern Plains Climate Hub. And you're probably wondering what climate has to do with dirt and why in the heck we're all that worried about dirt to begin with. Well, before I get started with this and kind of break down with this, I got another little demonstration I want to show you. Have y'all ever seen anybody talk about the earth as an apple?
Nope.
Nope. Well, here's why we're interested in soil and why it is such a big issue. You know, earth is round and the apple isn't exactly round, but let's just imagine that this is planet Earth. And we all know, if you know about planet Earth and know about your geography, what's the majority of the planet made up of?
Water.
That's right. That's right. So, a little over half of the planet right there, and actually 3/4 of the planet is water. So that's all the solid ground, that's all the dry land that there is on planet Earth. Now some of that dry ground is in places like the Mojave Desert and Antarctica and the Arctic. So you take that off, about half of that, fourth, and that's what you got left. Now who knows where the best farm ground in the world is right now? Who can tell me? Where's the best farm ground on planet Earth?
The plains in America.
No, it's under that, right over there. It's under concrete and asphalt. Because when civilization started, where did people start? Where did the cities grow up? Where they could feed themselves. The most productive land, the easiest place to grow crops, the best place to have livestock. So, you think about all the land that's under concrete, that's what you got left. Now, I mentioned the ice caps and the mountains and places like that. A whole lot of other places that are too dry or too cold that you can't grow any food on out of that's still left. In fact, when you stop and think about everything that's arable that we can grow food and fiber on, that's what we got left. Right there, out of planet Earth. And actually, that's what we got left. Because all of civilization rests on an inch topsoil. And in this part of the world, when it started to form, Christopher Columbus was in diapers. When it's gone, and it's never coming back. And we do an outstanding job in Oklahoma in control of soil erosion. We really do. Some of the best on planet Earth. But every year in this state, and it's no joke, you can do the math yourself. Just go back and look at ag statistics. Figure out the last 5 years what our average wheat yields are, how many acres are in wheat, and then what they say the average soil erosion is per acre in Oklahoma. You do the math, every year for every pound of wheat we produce in this state, we lose 2.5 pounds of soil. And we're one of the best in the world. Now you stop and think about that. How are we going to feed 9 billion people if we aren't caring for the soil? On top of that, when we talk about soil erosion, one of the big things, getting back to the Climate Hub and why we're interested in this, how many of you have heard the term soil health? Can't hardly pick up an mainstream agriculture publication without hearing about it. Big push by USDA. It's one of the new coming things in research that we're really looking at. The reason why, we've all heard the challenges that we have in the area of water quality. We all know about, a lot of folks talk about climate change. Of course, I've already mentioned soil erosion. All of these things are subject to the natural cycles that, quite frankly, through human activity, we've knocked out of balance. Our water cycle's out of balance, our carbon cycle's out of balance, and our nutrient cycle's out of balance. How do we solve that? By better caring for the soil. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that before I get too much of my time away, though. I'm going to ask my lovely assistant, Anna, to go over here and turn our water on. And I'm going to start a simulation of rainfall in the state of Oklahoma and talk to you a little bit about that.
You just stand right there in the way of that.
You might want to back up a little bit. So this is a good old-fashioned Oklahoma rainfall. When we get it running. There we go. Now what you're looking at here are different land management types in the state of Oklahoma. This is native prairie. Well, I say it's native prairie, it's got some Bermuda and some other things in it. But this comes from a place that has never been cultivated. How do I know that? My family's land. This comes off of pasture, 40 acres of pasture that's in between 40 acres of cropland and on one side and 80 acres of cropland on the other side in that quarter land. Never been cultivated. This is a conventional tilled wheat field. Now don't tell my neighbor that I got this because I didn't ask his permission, but this is wheat that is conventionally tilled. I dug it up right across the fence from this. Now I mentioned this was a 40-acre plot. 40 acres that's next to that is this. This is no-till wheat. The last 13 years this has not been cultivated. And the last 3 years it's had cover crops in it. And this is conventional tilled land. When I say conventional tilled land, I dug that up a mile away from another neighbor's place. Wheat ground that wheat hadn't come up in yet, and he said I could go in there and scrape some of his land up. But this is how we farm the majority of our wheat and stuff. What is our crops in the state of Oklahoma? This is no-till, this is conventional tilled wheat, and this is grass. Now if you notice, already one thing I want to say, of all of these, this is the only one that hasn't had any water put on it. Yesterday, I put 4 inches of rain on each one of these, and 3 days ago I put about 3.5 to 4 inches of rain on this pan. So that tells you how saturated the soils are. But I want to demonstrate what happens when we see rain on our land. Now, talking again about cycles. One of the things that we're pushing in the Southern Plains Climate Hub is the concept of soil health, so that we can better manage our water resources, both when we're dealing with droughts and when we're dealing with extreme flood events. Now, I live up here in the Cimarron. I farm and live in the Cimarron and North Canadian River watersheds. I have family that lives in Oklahoma City, but I got to tell you, I'm greedy, and I do not want to give them any more water than I absolutely have to. When I have water land on my place, I want to hang on to every drop, because a lot more people have left this state because it's too dry than too wet. According to Kansas State University, if you can increase the organic matter in your soil by just 1%, that can triple the soil's water holding capacity. That equals to about 12,000 gallons of water per acre per year for growing crops and for forage for livestock, if you can increase organic matter. Now, every time we till the soil, are we building organic matter or are we destroying organic matter? We're destroying organic matter. If you can minimize tillage, you can over time restore the organic matter in our soils. In fact, it's estimated we've lost anywhere from 60 to 80% of the organic matters out of our soils in the Great Plains. That's extremely important if we're going to give our producers the tools they need to deal with droughts. That's why I mentioned no-till. If we can do things to minimize our tillage and not disturb that soil, we can over time build that organic matter up. Because what is organic matter? It's about 60% organic carbon. And what did we all learn back in high school biology? Through photosynthesis, plants breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen. And if you don't disturb that soil, that organic carbon becomes sequestered in the soil. And not only is organic matter important, but it provides the food and the habitat for the bugs and bacteria and fungi underneath the surface of the ground that over time have built a symbiotic relationship with those plants. There's more teaspoon in a tablespoon of soil. There's more life in a tablespoon of soil than there are people walking on the face of the earth. And 10 years ago, we didn't know a lot of this even existed. This is new science. These are new things that we're looking at to try to improve production agriculture. But that symbiotic relationship that subsoil microbial community has with the plants on the surface is extremely critical. In fact, according to Ohio State, if you don't have a healthy subsoil microbial community, you're basically wasting fertilizer. ARS has said, the Agricultural Research Service has said, if you don't have a healthy subsoil microbial community, 60% of the fertilizer you put on your land, you just wasted. Because those bugs, bacteria, and fungi actually mineralize, make those nutrients more readily available for the plants to take up into their root system and help them better absorb those nutrients into the growth cycle. I was telling the group yesterday is that, when I grew up on a dairy farm, and I always gave those FFA dairy speeches, and there's always that obligatory line about calcium. And we always say, if you want to have calcium in your diet, taking a calcium supplement's good. But drinking a glass of milk's better. Because milk has vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, all those nutrients that help your body more readily assimilate calcium. You don't have that healthy bugs in your gut, you're wasting a lot of those nutrients. If you don't have those nutrients, or if you don't have those vitamins, your body can't assimilate what you want it to. The soil is the same way. It's a living ecosystem. And if you don't have a healthy subsoil microbial community, when you're putting down fertilizer, do yourself a favor. Anna, go ahead and turn that water off. Do yourself a favor. Just go to the bank, pull out your money, go to the creek, start throwing dollar bills in the water. because that's basically what you're doing. That's why that's some of the challenges that we see with, again, getting our nutrient cycle out of balance. Also, when you're talking about, and also, if you look at that as far as that 1% increase in organic matter, according to Ohio State, I say that you're wasting 60% of your fertilizer. They say in Ohio, now I can't say this for Oklahoma, but this is Ohio, they estimate that by having an increase in your organic matter by 1%, you can free up as much as $700 of additional nutrients for growing crops and forage. Now, let's just say in Oklahoma it's only $200 an acre. How many of y'all have got land and would like to give me your $200 an acre that you're giving away? I mentioned the thing about it, 60% of the organic matter being organic carbon. In Oklahoma, according to Oklahoma State, when we convert to no-till, we're sequestering roughly 0.5 metric ton of carbon dioxide per acre per year on no-till wheat. We're also burning about 3 gallons of diesel less per acre per year to produce a crop than you are under conventional till. Now that's a lot of CO2 going out of the atmosphere and a whole lot of nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide not being put in the atmosphere to begin with. In fact, last year the state of Oklahoma, and I'm going to brag on Oklahoma a little bit, we've got a very successful water quality program in this state using these practices. Using practices like planting grass on highly erodible land, taking it out of crop production, running cows on it, doing better pasture management, getting guys to convert to no-till, getting them to do cover crops. Through those practices, Oklahoma took 3 streams off the 303D list, the EPA's impaired list, last year in 2015. Oklahoma's actually taken more streams off the list than any other state in the union except for Virginia. And the folks from the State Conservation Commission will tell you Virginia cheats, but that's a whole nother. But bottom line is, it's completely voluntary. They have regulations in Virginia. We don't in Oklahoma. We ran the numbers on those 3 watersheds that were taken off the 303D list, all through taking land out, highly erodible land out of production, putting back to grass, converting to no-till, going in doing pasture management, incorporating cover crops into rotation with their cash crop. By doing that, not only did they clean up the water and take those streams off the 303D list, they also sequestered the equivalent of 7,500 cars worth of carbon dioxide. 7,500 cars off the road. Not through regulations, not through lawsuits, but through land management practices that at the end of the day, like I said, can help you hold on to water, help you burn less fuel, help you be more efficient in your fertilizer, and quite frankly, over time, hopefully increase your yields. I mentioned wheat a lot. Of course, it's our primary crop here in Oklahoma. We hit a ceiling on wheat yields in the 1980s, and we've never been able to break them. We'll have spikes. We'll have years like this where we have bumper crops. But overall, we really haven't been able to break the ceiling very well on our wheat yields. Nebraska has said we've hit a similar ceiling. They estimate worldwide on corn and soybeans. I mentioned we got 9 billion people to feed by mid-century. We've got to find ways to increase our productivity and do it in a way that doesn't destroy our resource base. Soil health is what USDA is one of the primary ways that we're trying to address that. The Climate Hub is part of that because our job is to help agriculture producers deal with extreme weather events. And I don't know who all in this room or in this crowd believes in climate change or not, but I'll guarantee you there ain't a single one of you, or I'll challenge you, is there anybody in here that does not believe in droughts and floods? Do you believe in droughts and floods? Well, if we have a heavy rain event, like we often do in the spring, we put about 3.5 inches of water on these pans, conventional tilled acres. Only about 20% of the state of Oklahoma right now, crop production is under no-till. So let's look and see what no-till did. A little bit of runoff. There's some, not a whole lot. Look at this. This is what went through the water, or went through the soil. And again, 3 days ago, it had another almost 4 inches of rain on it. And that's how much water went through that no-till. Now, I was told my entire life that you've got to open that ground up. You've got to get it ready for a rain. You know, if you open that ground up, it'll take it in better. Well, conventional tilled wheat, seed bed prepared. They dissed it at least 3 times this summer. They hit it probably with anhydrous. They spring toothed that they put in their wheat. How well did it do on that rain coming through and getting where you want it to go as far as infiltration? That's no-till, that's conventional till. And what did the conventional till do?
Runoff.
That's your runoff. And what's in there? Look at that sediment. I mentioned we lose 2.5 pounds of wheat or pounds of soil for every pound of wheat we produce. It's over 12,000 acres every year on average that we got going down the creek. Now granted, I live in the stack area over there where they're still drilling a lot of oil wells, so there's some guys that got some money in their pockets because of mineral rights right now. I don't know about you, but what's land going for where you live at? They sold some decent land over in Kingfisher County the other day, no mineral rights. Wasn't that good of land. Half of it was cultivated, half of it was in grass. $400,000. Now, I know that's not what land's going for on average in this state, but whatever it's going for, again, do yourself a favor. Don't farm, just go get your money out of the bank and throw it in the creek, because that's where the basis of all your wealth is going. And at the end of the day, all the soil, I told you about soil in Christopher Columbus. I don't see right there in your coffee cup. Cleopatra may very well have bathed in the water that you're drinking right now, because all the water that's ever been or ever will be is already here right now. We got to take care of what we have. And again, let's look at our conventional till. Now, granted, I put some rain on this yesterday, but look at the runoff of that conventional tilled wheat. That was off a heavy rain. Actually, it was off the same rain that my grassland had over here. These ran together yesterday. What did grassland do?
No runoff.
Now, which one's the most comparable to that? It was the no-till, wasn't it? And look at this, the water that infiltrated. So the idea that you got to work that ground up to take in moisture, I don't think that works too well. And that goes back to the idea of what we're talking about. By incorporating cover crops, by minimizing soil disturbance, you allow the soil to build up aggregates. That soil, that conventional tilled soil, actually started to collapse the first time a rainfall hit it. How many times, you can kind of see it on this board over here, how many times after a heavy rain have you had a place in your yard or your driveway that you see it splattered up against the dirt splattered up against the wall? It starts to crust the second that first raindrop hits. I mentioned the fungi, the bugs, bacteria that are in the soil that we're just now really starting to learn about. There's a thing, you call it glomalin, Dee, I call it glomalin, but it's actually some of the residue that's left from the root systems that whenever they decay in the soil, it's actually some of the glue that holds the soil particles together. If you don't disturb the soil, you allow that ecology to be there. You allow those root systems to maintain their structure, destroy the holes that are made by bugs, that are made by burrowing animals, but also just the aggregate structure of the soil. When you look into a healthy soil, it almost looks like cottage cheese. Those soils are made in aggregates, whereas a conventional tilled soil, it looks like layers of pancakes. And it's just the difference in how we've collapsed the structure of that soil. And it's not that anybody's doing anything bad. Like I said, we've just started looking at this science for the last decade. But it really can make a difference, because this stuff right here, I mentioned about the money that we're losing by having it go down the creek. Anywhere from 70 to 90% of all the bacteria, the nutrients, and actually turbidity, just plain old-fashioned dirt, is the #1 water quality problem we have in this state. But when you think about bacteria and nutrients, the majority of that, over 80% of it, is tied to the soil particle. If you can keep the soil in place, you're going to keep the water clean for the folks downstream. In fact, if you, again, going back to all those streams that we took off the impaired list in Oklahoma, it was done through those practices that hold the soil in place and help us ensure that those particles aren't getting into the water and what's tied to them and getting in the water as well. It's better for wildlife habitat. It helps address climate change. It helps address water runoff as far as non-point source pollution. It also helps with getting the water cycle back in balance, which means when you do have dry times, you're going to have more intermittent stream flow. You know, how many times have you heard the weatherman talk about how, well, Gary McManus, our state climatologist down at OU, loves to talk about how droughts feed on themselves. If you don't have subsoil moisture, if you don't have any moisture in the soil, it takes a lot more moisture and energy to try to break a drought. A drought will feed on itself if you have that cycle out of balance. You could maintain subsoil moisture. It not only helps you as an agriculture producer, but it helps put that cycle in balance, helps weaken the strength of the droughts, and it also helps you with existing stream flow so your water lasts longer. Puts it back into balance. That carbon cycle puts it back into balance. Because what are we doing? When you drive your car, what are you doing? You're not doing anything but mining sunshine. It's carbon dioxide that millions of years ago, through photosynthesis, was organic matter that got in the soil, it got collapsed down, and over time pressure turned it into fossil fuel. So what happens when we burn natural gas, when we burn coal, it's all sunshine. Everything on this planet is powered by the sun. All we're talking about is trying to get that cycle a little bit back into balance. Getting that carbon dioxide in the form of organic carbon, in the form of organic matter sequestered in the soil, maybe not burning as much to begin with to produce a growing crop, and at the end of the day, serving to produce money. You know, so many times in agriculture, we always think about the environment and farming and ranching as being like this. Well, people, there's always something to disagree over. But I would contend that when we're talking about soil health, this is the one place where we ought to all be able to come around the fire for a little while and sing Kumbaya.